In the years since the trial, the name Becky Watts has remained etched into the memory of Bristol, a city that once searched tirelessly for a missing schoolgirl and instead uncovered a crime too harrowing to comprehend. For many residents, February 2015 still feels close. Streets that were once filled with volunteers handing out posters and knocking on doors now carry a quiet, lingering sadness. The case left a mark not only on the community's landscape, but on its sense of safety and trust. Parents who once allowed their children a little more freedom began to look at the world differently. Neighbors who had stood shoulder to shoulder during the search were united by grief, yet shaken by the realization that unimaginable harm could arise from within familiar walls. The collective heartbreak transformed into a sober awareness that evil does not always announce itself from afar. As the court proceedings unfolded, the details revealed were deeply distressing, forcing the public to confront the stark reality behind the headlines. For many, following the trial was both necessary and unbearable, a pursuit of justice intertwined with profound sorrow. The verdict brought accountability, but it could not restore what had been lost. Closure, in the truest sense, remained elusive. In the years that followed, tributes and memorials ensured that Becky would be remembered not only for the tragedy, but for the vibrant, creative young person she was. Friends and teachers spoke of her energy, her imagination, and the warmth she brought into classrooms and homes. Those memories endure as a quiet counterpoint to the darkness of the crime, a reminder that her life was far greater than the circumstances of her death. Today, Bristol continues forward, changed but not defeated. The story remains a solemn chapter in the city's history, a reminder of both the fragility of innocence and the strength of a community that came together in hope, heartbreak, and remembrance. Darren Galsworthy has spoken openly about the unbearable weight of hindsight. The warning signs that now seem obvious were invisible then, buried beneath the routines of everyday family life. He has described the agony of realizing that the danger was not outside the home, but within it. Trust, once broken in such a catastrophic way, leaves wounds that never fully close. In interviews since the trial, he has reflected on how grief is not a single emotion but a shifting landscape, shock giving way to sorrow, sorrow to anger, and, at times, to a quiet determination to endure. The hardest burden, he has suggested, is the relentless questioning, the what-ifs that echo long after the courtrooms empty and the headlines fade. For parents, the instinct to protect is fundamental, and when that instinct feels as though it has failed, the pain cuts deeper than words can fully capture. Yet alongside that anguish has come a resolve to speak honestly about loss, responsibility, and the complexity of family dynamics. By sharing his perspective, he has sought not sympathy but understanding, a way to acknowledge that tragedy can grow in silence and that healing, though imperfect, begins with confronting difficult truths. For Becky's brother Dan, the loss was equally shattering. Siblings share a language of their own, built on private jokes and childhood memories. Losing that bond in such a violent way created a silence that could never truly be filled. Friends who once filled Becky's room with laughter were left grappling with grief far too heavy for teenagers to carry. In the months and years that followed, that absence became part of everyday life, not always loud or visible, but constant. Birthdays, holidays, and ordinary family gatherings carried an unspoken awareness of who was missing. For a brother, the future once imagined side by side, graduations, milestones, shared adulthood, was suddenly rewritten. What remained were photographs, messages saved on phones, and the fragile comfort of memory. For Becky's friends, adolescence was abruptly divided into a before and an after. At an age when the world is meant to feel expansive and full of possibility, they were confronted instead with mortality and the harshest realities of betrayal. Schools offered support, communities rallied, yet no guidance could entirely shield them from the shock of losing someone so young in circumstances so brutal. And still, amid the sorrow, stories of Becky's humor, creativity, and kindness continued to surface. In sharing those memories, her brother and her friends found a way, however imperfect, to keep her presence alive. Grief did not disappear, but it evolved, becoming intertwined with remembrance, resilience, and the quiet determination that her life would not be defined solely by its tragic end. The case also forced difficult conversations about coercive control and manipulation. Prosecutors argued that Nathan Matthews' influence over Shauna Hoare began when she was underage, shaping a dynamic rooted in imbalance and exploitation. While that context explained certain elements, it did not erase responsibility. The court ultimately determined that both had played roles in a plan that escalated beyond imagination and resulted in the death of Becky Watts. Coercive control refers to patterns of behavior designed to dominate or manipulate another person, often undermining their autonomy and decision-making. In legal and psychological discussions, it is recognized that such dynamics can complicate assessments of culpability, particularly when one party exerts significant influence over the other. However, recognition of these dynamics does not negate accountability for actions taken. Courts must balance understanding of context with the requirement to judge individual responsibility. The broader public conversation sparked by the case has highlighted the importance of identifying signs of unhealthy or exploitative relationships early. Safeguarding efforts, education, and support services aim to empower individuals to recognize and resist manipulation. At the same time, society continues to grapple with the complexity of human behavior, acknowledging that explanation is not the same as justification. Through such reflection, the hope is to learn lessons that might help prevent future harm. During sentencing, the judge described the crime as planned and sadistic, rejecting the idea that it was a spontaneous act of anger. The so-called kidnap kit, the carefully timed purchases, and the methodical cleanup painted a picture of preparation. Becky Watts had not been the victim of a sudden outburst. She had been targeted. The court heard how deliberate steps had been taken in advance, each one dismantling the narrative of impulsivity. Evidence revealed calculation rather than chaos, intention rather than loss of control. It was this element of forethought that deepened the horror for many observing the case. The idea that such harm had been carefully orchestrated forced the public to confront a chilling level of premeditation. In delivering the sentence, the judge emphasized the breach of trust at the heart of the crime, a betrayal not only of familial bonds but of basic human decency. The language used in court reflected the gravity of that violation. Justice, in legal terms, required clarity about what had occurred. This was not a tragedy born of a fleeting temper, but a sustained and conscious decision to inflict harm. For Becky's family, those findings were devastating in their precision. Each detail confirmed what had been feared, yet hearing it laid out so starkly brought its own kind of anguish. The verdict provided accountability, but it also underscored a painful truth that what happened was not accidental, not inevitable, but chosen. The forensic evidence presented at trial was painstaking and clinical, yet behind every photograph and lab result was the reality of a 16-year-old girl whose future had been stolen. Jurors later stated that the deliberations were swift because the evidence was overwhelming. The clarity of proof did not make the outcome any less devastating. Experts outlined timelines, traced fibers, examined digital records, and reconstructed movements with meticulous care. Each exhibit was designed to remove doubt, to replace speculation with fact. In the controlled language of the courtroom, the story unfolded piece by piece, sterile in presentation, yet rooted in something profoundly human and tragic. For the jury, the responsibility was clear but heavy. The strength of the evidence meant there was little ambiguity about what had occurred. Still, certainty did not lessen the emotional toll. To review such material in detail was to confront the deliberate destruction of a young life, and the weight of that knowledge lingered long after the verdict was reached. In the end, the trial demonstrated the power of forensic science and careful investigation, but it also highlighted a sobering truth. Even the most methodical pursuit of justice cannot restore what has been taken. The facts could be established beyond reasonable doubt. The loss, however, remained immeasurable. Darren Galsworthy's book, The Evil Within, became both a memorial and a warning. In it, he explores not only Becky's life, but the psychological aftermath of betrayal. Writing, he said, was one of the only ways to process the chaos left behind. Through sharing his story, he hoped to keep Becky's memory alive beyond headlines and court transcripts. The book moves between remembrance and reckoning, celebrating Becky's creativity, humor, and warmth, while also confronting the painful realities that followed her death. It reflects on the complexities of blended families, missed signs, and the corrosive power of hindsight. For Darren, putting those experiences into words was not about reopening wounds, but about making sense of them. By publishing his account, he also sought to challenge complacency, to encourage open conversations about trust, safeguarding, and the subtle dynamics that can exist behind closed doors. The act of writing became a form of endurance, a way of asserting that Becky's story would not be reduced to a single, horrific chapter. In preserving her memory through pages rather than police files, he created something lasting, a testament to who she was, and a reminder that even in the aftermath of profound darkness, love and remembrance can persist. Community memorials continue to draw visitors. The bench in Goats Field stands as a quiet tribute, its carved unicorn reflecting Becky's gentle, imaginative side. Flowers still appear there from time to time, left by people who never met her but were moved by her story. For some, the memorial is a place of reflection. For others, a way to acknowledge the human cost of a crime that captured national attention. The unicorn carving symbolizes innocence and hope, a reminder of who Becky was beyond the circumstances of her death. Visitors often sit in silence, leaving small tokens or handwritten notes, gestures that speak to the enduring impact her story has had on strangers, as well as those who knew her. Such memorials do not erase grief, nor do they provide answers to the questions that remain. But they create space for remembrance, allowing a community to honor a young life and recognize the pain of those left behind. In that quiet act of commemoration, the story continues, not only as a record of tragedy, but as a testament to memory and human empathy. The tragedy also highlighted the importance of taking missing person reports seriously from the outset. While police followed procedure, the case reinforced how critical the first hours can be. Since then, advocacy groups have pushed for faster, more proactive responses when minors vanish under suspicious circumstances. Guidance and training for officers have evolved, emphasizing early risk assessment and coordination between agencies. The aim is to minimize delays and ensure that information is shared swiftly, increasing the chances of locating missing individuals safely. Public awareness campaigns have also encouraged families and communities to report concerns without hesitation, recognizing that prompt action can make a significant difference. Although no procedural reform can undo past loss, lessons drawn from difficult cases shape future practice. The objective is prevention and protection, to improve systems so that missing person investigations receive the urgency they deserve from the very beginning. For many observers, one of the most chilling aspects remains the text messages uncovered during the investigation. They revealed fantasies that had existed long before Becky Watts's death, suggesting escalation rather than impulse. It was a sobering reminder that violent intent often leaves digital footprints. Such evidence often plays a pivotal role in modern investigations. Messages, search histories, and online communications can establish timelines and mental states that would otherwise be difficult to prove. While these details can be unsettling, they help courts and investigators build a clearer understanding of events. The existence of digital footprints also reinforces the importance of responsible online behavior and awareness of how seemingly private communications may later become part of legal proceedings. Becky Watts's friends have grown into adulthood carrying her memory with them. Milestones, graduations, careers, relationships are bittersweet reminders of the life she never had the chance to live. Some have spoken in interviews about still imagining what she might be like today, the dreams she could have pursued, and the shared experiences that might have shaped their adult lives together. Grief for a friend can evolve over time, but rarely disappears. For those who knew her, remembrance becomes part of their personal history, not a constant source of pain, but a quiet acknowledgement of what was lost. Stories and memories help keep her presence alive in their lives, ensuring that she is remembered not solely for the circumstances of her death, but for the friendships and moments that defined her as a person. Ongoing research emphasizes that understanding these mechanisms should be coupled with ethical sensitivity. While patterns can be analyzed, individual cases represent profound human suffering. Scholars therefore balance analytical insight with respect for those affected. Prevention, education, and community awareness remain central goals. By studying past events, societies aim not to sensationalize tragedy, but to strengthen safeguards and promote healthier interpersonal dynamics. Ultimately, knowledge serves the purpose of reducing harm and fostering environments where conflict does not escalate into irreversible outcomes. And so remembrance becomes a way of holding space for both grief and meaning. Becky Watts is remembered not only for the tragedy of her death, but for the life she lived, a life marked by ordinary hopes and relationships. Communities often find strength in such remembrance, recognizing that honoring a person's memory can foster empathy and understanding. While the past cannot be changed, the way we reflect on it shapes how we approach the future. In acknowledging humanity in every story, society affirms the value of compassion and the responsibility to protect it. It acknowledges that the story of Becky Watts is not defined solely by its tragic ending, but also by the life that preceded it, the relationships, creativity, and everyday moments that gave it meaning. Remembrance can hold both truths: the need to understand and learn from what happened, and the desire to honor the individual who once lived. Such balance allows narratives of loss to become also narratives of empathy and human value, reminding us why memory matters.